私の名はマリー・ローズ。
To start this off, this is not a full tutorial. This is just me remaking the costume I already have. But there is a PDF pattern available in one size, and you can print it out in A4 and letter size paper. So I'm starting off here with this costume I made back in 2022, and the first thing I wanted to do is add in a dart on the chest part where the stripe is, because it's very flat and it's open in the sides. Other than that, I don't have too many complaints about the construction of this costume. I'm just changing out the navy blue fabric to a higher quality fabric using Ceraflex thread, which is a stretchy thread, and making minor tweaks to the pattern. One of the biggest issues I had with the stockings on this costume, as you can tell, is that there was a tension issue on the top stitching. It was torture top stitching this entire spot. Even with tissue, painter's tape, and all sorts of tricks, it just was not working out. I had a much easier time using it on my computerized machine with the Ceraflex thread on the slowest speed. My only other big issue with this costume is this navy blue fabric. It's kind of like upholstery fabric to me, it feels like. It was giving me a rash when I'd wear it, and it barely had any stretch. That's what I get for being cheap when it comes to PVC fabric, to be honest. Next is the stuff I have no intention of remaking. So it's the gloves, which is just a white stretch fabric glove underneath a black pleather glove with a red belt glued to it. The pattern for the gloves is also included in my sewing pattern PDF if you are interested. For the boots, they are some cheap Forever 21 boots that I made into faux wedges with EVA foam, and use snaps to attach a little like skirt type thing on the top. I wouldn't recommend these boots at all, to be honest. I would recommend thrifting some that fit much better than these. I barely have any ankle movement, but they look good at least, I guess. For the little rose detail on the side, I use my vinyl cutter to cut it. And then for the heel, on the bottom of the heel, I use my vinyl cutter to make a stencil and painted it. The navy blue fabric I'm using for this costume is from Blue Moon Fabrics. I bought 3 yards of it, but honestly you could probably get away with using 2 or 2.5. So here's just a little comparison to show the difference in stretch. Next I got Ceraflex thread from Red Rock Threads. The lighter blue fabric I'm using is just from Etsy. I will link the shop down in the description. And lastly, the red PVC fabric is just the DTJAAAAM fabric from Joanne. Rip in peace. Here's a little list of extra materials. I'm probably forgetting some, but yeah. Starting off, I just added 2 inches to the top of the pattern I already had. I assumed I was gonna have to take it in a bit, but honestly, I guess PVC fabric doesn't really stretch very much since I didn't have to make any other alterations to this pattern. After that, I cut out 2.5 centimeter wide strips of the light blue and red fabric and the length of the stocking. This isn't the most optimal way of cutting out the stripes, but it really doesn't matter because in the next part you will have to draw out guidelines anyway. After that, I sew together a red and light blue stripe, right sides facing together with 1 centimeter seam allowance. After that, using a Crayola washable marker, I mark 5mm guidelines along the light blue and red fabric. You may notice in this clip that it's actually 1 centimeter wide guidelines. I didn't like how it looked, so I redid it. If you're worried about the marker potentially ruining or staining your fabric, it all comes off with a magic eraser and water. I highly recommend this step because it ensures that your lines are precise and clean. You don't want to make too many holes in this sort of fabric at all, because every single hole is permanent and visible. Next steps here are just really straightforward. I'm just sewing the stripes to the main stocking fabric and making a wearable stocking. Another tip I have, if your machine has it, use that stretch stitch that stitches each stitch 3 times, because I will say that my costume has had some stitches pop because I've had to do certain parts multiple times over. So that's just something to think about. I personally didn't use it because I'm too much of a coward, and I half regret it, half don't. It's a little tricky with this fabric because of all the holes that you make, but if you can really get your stitches perfect, I highly recommend it. Next, I'm just removing the band from the old stocking. The band is just a rectangle of pleather and a rectangle of flowy fabric that I gathered into a frill and sandwiched between it. In this step, I will be cutting the stocking off the seam allowance of the band so that I can stitch the frill and the pleather part to it. This is so that I don't lose that frill because I just gathered it and sewed it straight to the stocking, if that makes any sense. I didn't have access to my serger, so I'm just doing a zigzag stitch to attach that pleather and that frill together. Using my Seriflex thread, I'm just sewing the top band to my stocking with a straight stitch. By the way, Seriflex thread is just a stretchy thread that you can use for stretch fabrics and sew a normal ordinary straight stitch with. Lastly, I'm just top stitching the band on with my Seriflex thread again. I highly recommend going very, very slowly with this and using a Teflon foot. This is a really tricky fabric to work with, and don't pull it through the machine. I'm just pulling it taut because it was pinching underneath the foot sometimes, but do not pull it through as you're going along, or else that will cause more tension issues. If you plan on making this costume on your own, good luck with this part. You're gonna need it. First off, I cut out the pattern pieces like usual. The sleeves have regular stripes like I did with the stockings, but I didn't film myself cutting them, and then these stripes with this curve at the top. Next, I sew the stripes together with 1 centimeter seam allowance. For the curved part, you want to stop right where the curve starts. Just like with the stockings right after this part, you want to draw your 5 millimeter guidelines again, and then start sewing it to the sleeve part. Here's a clip sewing one of the stripes to a sleeve pattern piece. Yeah, I feel like you kind of get the vibe, to be honest, but I filmed this for a reason, so I guess I'm adding the clips in, okay? Right after you sew the little curved part though, you do want to cut the seam allowance right on the curved part only to 5 millimeters, so then you can fold the rest of the seam allowance over and then top stitch it down. When top stitching that little curved part in, you want to use the stitch in the ditch method, so then you can't see any top stitching at all. Next, I'm measuring the distance between the crisscrosses so I can mark them on my new sleeves before I do anything else. For the distance, it's 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter from the bottom, and then 1.5 centimeter apart for both the crisscrosses. Right after that, I will start stitch ripping off the top band. To be honest, I wouldn't do the top band like this. I wouldn't recommend it. I just hand sewed it on because I was having issues with my machine, and it was the tension was all off when I was sewing, top stitching the pleather of the stockings. If you do this, I would recommend making a little belt, and then having it longer than the top of your sleeve, and then having the ends hang off, and then top stitch it on, and then fold the ends over your thing, if that makes any sense. Next, I stitch rip each little suede cord piece, one at a time, and then I'll hand sew it onto the new sleeve one by one. Just a warning, hand sewing suede cord is extremely annoying and time consuming, and it hurts your fingertips, so if you do not want to do suede cord, I'd recommend doing ribbon or something. I just did it because I thought it would look nice and I had a ton of suede cord. This clip of me stitch ripping this piece of suede cord and hand sewing it on alone without being sped up is over 5 minutes, just saying. After that torture, it was time to sew the top band on. To be honest, this was really annoying because apparently my sleeve, the top of my sleeve is way wider than the sleeve band I made. So I kind of just messed around with it until it was okay enough. It doesn't look like it's too small, but it is. When I was hand sewing this also, I was just doing like little tacks on there and just kind of like, so it can still stretch, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I would not recommend do it this way, but I don't have any more of that pleather, and I was con crunching, so there's no way I was going to be able to like replace it. But yeah. And here's a close-up of the finished sleeve and the inside of it. See, it doesn't look too bad. Starting off, I'm making alterations to my pattern. I'm adding more to the neckline and to the chest because that was one of the issues I had, and I'd rather have too much than not enough. That way I can just take it down wherever I need it to be. And then I'm going to add a little dart to the chest, the part where the stripe is. And after that, I just traced the rest of the pattern like normal. For the back pieces, I wanted to make the V shape in the back a lot more pronounced, so I'm just basically just doing that. For some reason, this is all I have of the outer front piece. To be honest, I don't think I changed much outside of just adding more to that side part like I did in the center piece. For the crotch piece, I just made it a little bit lower in the back, and then I altered the back pieces to go in line with that. Here's me adding on the length that I took off the crotch part onto the back piece. Here's a little sped up compilation of me just cutting out all the pattern pieces you already saw me alter. Like I did in all the other parts, I start off by sewing all the stripes together. I also still use Crayola washable marker to draw 5mm guidelines and then sew it down to the actual pieces. But yeah, sewing this all together is very self-explanatory. I feel like it's very easy. Honestly, the worst part of making this costume was sewing the invisible zipper in and then sewing the stripes 5mm wide afterwards. I have no advice at all, I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to just do it and pray that you get it good enough. After you get a wearable bodysuit, you're gonna wanna try it on inside out and have the Crayola washable marker on hand and mark where you wanna like alter it. And here's a clip of me showing how I altered the pattern to redo it. After I got the bodysuit the way I wanted it to be, I stitch ripped off the frill off of my old bodysuit to sew it back onto it. The frill is just some flowy fabric from Joann that I gathered, and it's sandwiched between some double fold bias tape. My camera's completely off in this clip, but all I'm doing is just putting down a basting stitch on this hip frill, so then when I'm pinning it onto the bodysuit while I'm wearing it, it won't come undone or anything. Once I've got it where I want it to be, I'm just top stitching it down. And you want to make 1,000,000% sure you really like the way this is, because if you mess up like I did, you'll have permanent holes in your bodysuit, and you definitely do not want that. Next, I'm cutting out a bunch of stripes for the binding all along the edges of the entire bodysuit. To be honest, I wanted to do a V-shaped like binding for the back piece to make it the V shape even more pronounced, but this was all the fabric I had left, and I was worried that I wasn't even going to have enough for this binding. But thankfully, I had a little bit more than enough. But yeah, if you're making this project or something similar, I would definitely recommend doing a V-shaped back binding piece instead, because I feel like my back piece looks a little bit rounded because it doesn't have that at all. I don't know. For the binding, I'm just stitching it with 5mm seam allowance and then just folding it over and then top stitching it like I did with the sleeves basically. Lastly, I'm stitching the bow off my original bodysuit, and then I'm cutting the collar off of it to resew onto my new one. I was originally going to stitch rip the collar off, but then I saw that I sandwiched it between, and I was worried I was going to lose the frill and everything, so I was like, screw that, I'm just going to go cut it off. Here I am hand stitching on the bodysuit onto the collar. It's not the prettiest looking on the inside, but this isn't a competition piece or anything, so I'm not too pressed. But yeah, I definitely recommend sandwiching your bodysuit part to your inside your collar if you want a cleaner looking finish. Thank you so much if you've made it to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. I hope this video helped if you're making a cosplay or anything like that. Shout out to Justin Pineda Media, I hope I'm saying that correctly, for filming me at MagFest and letting me use that as my intro. Shout out to the person who bought me the materials to even remake this cosplay. And I want to shout out all my Patreon subscribers, specifically the tier 3 ones. It really, really helps me out a lot. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. I don't know if you guys understand how much I appreciate you guys. Sorry, I'm starting to ramble. I'll end this video now. Bye bye.